Hello and welcome to Movers and Makers Virtual Chat Series, Episode 5, brought to you by Low-Key Arts in Hot Springs National Park, Arkansas, and made possible with the support of the Gail Pratt Fraser Trust. I am your host, Sonny Kay, Executive Director of Low-Key Arts. My guest today is someone near and dear to me, who has had a huge influence on my life since we first met in Boulder, Colorado, some 32 years ago. Since then, we've been bandmates, we've been housemates, we've been co-authors. Bob is a prolific printmaker and author, musician, documentarian, publisher, and not the least of all, art teacher. He joins us this evening from his home in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates. Bob, welcome to Movers and Makers.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Pleasure having you.
Yeah, I like your shows. These are fantastic.
Well, thanks. I'm glad that we were able to arrange a time to do this together. I know it's really early in the morning where you are. I appreciate you being here. It's awesome. Let's talk about, first of all, why you're joining us from Abu Dhabi. You've lived there now for about 2 years.
Yeah, we've been here for almost 2 years. My wife and I are teachers here at an international school. Mm-hmm. And it's been kind of a wild journey. It was kind of funny because we didn't actually think we were going to go to Abu Dhabi. We actually were in line to go to, we thought we were going to have a job in Shanghai, a really nice school there. Then that kind of blew that interview at the last moment. Then ended up in, we were in line for a school in Moscow.
Okay.
Really big American school there, and thank God we didn't get that school because I guess there was visa issues the following year, and we had a job offer in Japan, and we had one in Saudi Arabia, and we were just all kind of set to go back to San Diego actually, and the school called us up, and I guess we were kind of desperate. I think they were kind of desperate because I guess they had an art teacher lined up, and it didn't work out, and so here we are.
Let's just, before we get back to the beginning of your story, let's just talk about this a little bit further, expound upon it. You've spent about 10 years overseas, maybe a little bit longer by this point, as a teacher, and your wife Anna as well, in an international school system. Am I correct that all these schools are kind of networked? Is that right?
They're loosely networked. In some ways, I mean, we work with an embassy-affiliated school, a U.S. embassy-affiliated school. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of a little bit of the circuit we're on. So we started actually in Alexandria, Egypt, in 2009, and that was because a result of the funding of art programs in the United States in San Diego, where we were. Mm-hmm. So we were kind of like, oh my God, what are we going to do? So we had to start looking elsewhere. First, we started looking at different states, and we started looking at Department of Education schools, and we just happened upon the international school scene. And so we were offered jobs in Alexandria, Egypt, and we went. We didn't know, it was an initial 2-year contract, and we're like flying in the plane over Cairo, and Cairo was just huge. It's so daunting, and I was just like looking at Anna, and in my head, it's like, oh my God, what did we get ourselves into?
And then you wound up being there twice, right? You were there.
Yeah, we ended up spending 8 years there. It was such an incredible place. It's so full of culture, and just the people are just lovely, and Egypt in general, just so friendly and welcoming. Mm-hmm. So I think that played a huge factor, and plus we lived on campus. It was almost like a fishbowl. Some people like that sort of lifestyle, and some don't. We liked it a lot because we felt like a really close-knitted community there. So kind of like punk rock,
Sure. So let's talk about punk rock. That's sort of our shared history, I guess you could say. I first met you at the infamous Penny Lane coffee shop in Boulder, Colorado, where for a few years it was about the most sort of ground zero for punk music in Colorado, I think you could say. And you were a fixture there, promoting shows and selling records on your fledgling label, Donut Crew Records. You were certainly the first record executive that I had ever met in my life. And let's talk about where that began. Now, you're a child of a military family, but don't appear to have a military bone in your body. And I wonder why not.
That's a great question. Yeah, both have, I have two older brothers, and they both went in the military, and they actually still.
Following your dad's footsteps, I should add, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my dad was in the military. He kind of traveled Europe and spent a lot of time in South and Central America, working at embassies there. And then my eldest brother went into the Marines when he turned like 17, 18, and the other brother followed and eventually went into the Navy, and they continued working, serving the U.S. government, for the rest of their careers.
Right.
And I guess I did to a degree, teaching public education. And so in some ways, I also served, a
different kind of trench.
Greater cause, I just, the military, I guess growing up, I was kind of fascinated by it. But by the time I got into punk rock, it wasn't really interesting too much anymore.
Right.
Seeing the idea of going to war or going to police in another country didn't capture my imagination.
Sure.
So,
but you've never. I think I'm correct in my understanding that you have never had an adversarial relationship with anyone in your family over your different sort of values. Am I right?
Oh no, never. We just kind of.
So with that in mind, I want to start with the first piece of art that you sent me for us to discuss this evening. And I want to talk about it in the context of your family. And that's this, which I have a caption for here. This is apparently something that you painted in the 11th grade.
Yeah, it was actually my first acrylic on canvas. It was my first canvas painting I ever made. And I guess the idea of, because, we were living in Ronald Reagan America at the time. And in some ways it was just the idea was kind of bum out people in some ways, because everyone was like, America, rah, rah, rah. Then you started, because my idea was like, America, rah, rah, rah. And everyone's talking about freedom, but it felt so oppressive, I guess, at the time. A lot of ways, like, when I say oppressive, like people are kind of like being thought police and whatnot. And so the idea of, the Statue of Liberty representing freedom, and yet you have, people that are trying to impose certain laws on your speech. And that's kind of like what that painting was about. So in some ways, having that display that, a suburban high school did kind of raise a lot of eyebrows, but it was more in jest than anything. It wasn't like a huge, serious, political painting.
Sure, but I think it's fair to say you have a lifelong tendency towards how can I say this? Poking fun at the obviously absurd, or throwing a light on various hypocrisies or other things like that, pushing buttons. And I think you're the only one in your family cut from that cloth. And I wonder, what did your dad have to say about that painting? How much encouragement did you get from your parents when you started expressing yourself this way?
I think my parents were pretty hands off. They were just kind of like, would shake their heads like, why would you paint something like that? And we'd have a conversation about that. And they knew I didn't really mean any kind of ill will towards it. It's just sometimes, I guess I like to engage in conversation. And I think you're partially right when you say like, I like to poke at things. And there are so many absurd things in life that need to be discussed, and you just kind of have to bring to the surface to talk about them. Otherwise, I think it gets lost on people.
Mhm.
So I did a lot of that with my artwork. Now I just do that with Facebook posts, I guess.
Well, about a year after we met, we wound up moving in together in Boulder. You had enrolled in the University of Colorado in the fine arts department, and we're moving from Denver to Boulder. And I was already living in Boulder, and so we moved in together and started a band, Savalis, that was our vehicle for a couple of years, and we put out some records and toured and that kind of thing, and sort of got some experience under our belts. You were already kind of experienced yourself. You're a couple of years older than I am. But once we started living together, I noticed, and it became immediately apparent, which I hadn't noticed before I lived with you, just how incredibly prolific you are when it comes to art. I mean, you started bringing home these enormous canvases, kind of like every week there'd be another one, right? And you seemed really, I don't know if it was the requirement. I'm sure certainly some of that was the requirements of your course load and stuff. But you seemed to really hit the ground running when you got into school, and your art to me really took center stage in a way that I didn't even really know that you were an artist before that point. I knew that you were a guy who put out records, and I knew you were a musician. But it took actually living under the same roof with you to start seeing this incredible amount of visual stuff that you were cranking out, and indeed you have continued to crank out, frankly, if you ask me. I don't think you've slowed really at all. Let me. I want to drop in one of the works from that time, which is pretty. I think. I just deleted my caption for this, unfortunately, but this is from 1991, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
It is. I guess the idea behind that painting, or kind of going back to what you said, I did feel like I kind of hit the ground running. Before I went to CU, I was at community college and just really obsessed with like making artwork. And the cool thing about living at CU is like I practically felt like I lived in my art studio. I know I was there all the time, often at night. I got inspiration after spending a whole day at school and going and painting.
Uh-huh.
But that was a series that having grown up in the punk scene, some of my friends at the time started drifting kind of politically to the right and kind of got involved in I guess the Ku Klux Klan. So I felt like I was trying to deal with that in some ways by painting about it. Like my idea is like why would you get involved in that sort of thing?
Mm-hmm.
So I would be painting it from almost like a child perspective, hence the little girl in the sandbox. The idea of being in control of kind of like her destiny, and the idea of a simple word, cat, on her sweater, is that we often learn as kids, through our parents or through modeling about hate in a lot of ways. So I would put like clan figures as puppets, as without eyes, just almost kind of like faceless people in some ways, because in some ways that's the way ignorance is in a lot of ways. People just follow because they need something to believe in, and it's obvious. Like it's just not a problem in the United States with QAnon and other conspiracy based ideas, which I think comes out of ignorance in a lot of ways. I mean, I don't want to get political here, but I mean, it is a politically charged painting, and I think we go through cycles of being in politically charged environments.
Mm-hmm.
God, I just wish I could focus on something else sometimes. And but yeah, I guess I've always kind of been driven to engage in art. So I don't think of myself actually as a prolific artist at all. But then again, I look back at scans and photographs I've taken and stuff. I guess I've always been driven to create an image, even if it's like a photographic one or printmaking or whatever. It's just what I'm compelled to do, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I followed you into the fine arts department at the University of Colorado too, and I can say without any doubt, my body of work that resulted from that is far smaller than yours. I have much less to show for my time there than I think you did. But that's okay. I mean, I was busy doing other things, and
you were very busy doing other things, or
ignoring my classwork. But that's neither here nor there. Once you left Boulder, you graduated in, I believe, in 92 or 3?
92, yeah, December of 92.
And soon we're on your way to the South. You first moved to Birmingham, am I right?
I did. I met a girl down there through selling records in the back of Maximum Rock and Roll, and went, of all places in the world, went to go live in Alabama for a year, and that definitely had an impact on my art, especially coming off painting like on my clan painting series to actually being kind of ground zero for that sort of stuff, and going and seeing all that.
It seems in hindsight almost predestined that you would wind up moving to Alabama, of all places, on the heels of this whole body of Klan motivated artwork. It seems, I know there was no, I know you weren't intending to move there, it's just the way things worked out, but it must have felt like, I don't know, some kind of prophetic thing to find yourself in that reality after having kind of been contemplating it for a few years.
Yeah, I mean, it was wild because we get in the car, and my friend Noah and I would get in the car and we'd just drive around, to small towns in Alabama, and there's just a plethora of like really borderline racist stuff that was there. So we would take a lot of pictures of it, and we'd talk with people, and in a very kind of non-judgmental way, just to get to figure out where you're coming from as a person. Because it's one thing when you're coming from like Denver and Boulder, where it's not so apparent. Then you go where it's very overtly, racist in a lot of ways. Then we came back to move back to the University of Colorado to go. When I went into education, I had a presentation called "Come and Meet Bubba" from Alabama, and it was basically a slideshow, and I just showed whoever showed up. I mean, I put flyers up everywhere on the university, so I was, maybe got like 20, 30 people that were curious, like, who's Bubba, and I
in Boulder.
Yeah,
in Boulder, right? Okay.
Yeah, and I think most of the images had to do with like hot dog stands, because there were like a crazy amount of hot dog stands in Birmingham, Alabama for some reason.
All right. So you, at that point, around that time, before you came back to Boulder, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you started really getting into the lino cut woodblock format, I guess, medium, and you started producing work related to the Olympics in Atlanta. Is that right?
Yeah. So we went back to Boulder, and after.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, so yeah, my bad. Keep going. That's right. So that was in '96. Sorry.
Yeah, that was in '96 when we moved. Went back to the South. My wife then Janet got a job that relocated us to Atlanta, and by then I had been tinkering around with block printing. Then ended up during the Olympics, like right at the beginning of the Olympics there, and I was like, started thinking like, it'd be cool to make a hustle at this, or like I want to be a part of millions of people in Atlanta and stuff. So I would crank out these woodblock prints and just go sell, much like you would sell like 7-inch records out of a box. Now I was selling woodblock prints out of a box. It's totally ridiculous. Like, who in their right mind does that sort of thing?
Well, people were buying them, right? I mean, you sold a whole bunch of them.
I did. It was crazy. Like, I mean, I sold them for like $5 a pop.
Wow.
And who wants to carry around a lino block print in a plastic bag in, you know, the middle of the summer?
Well, in the barrel, I guess. Yeah, somebody does. So I think at that point, it's fair to say that your work kind of started taking on more of a traditional, I think, what you might call Day of the Dead, Mexican sort of folk art type of vibe, with sort of well, I think more traditional themes. I wish I had included some of the Olympic images in this, so we could see some examples of that. But sadly, I didn't, unfortunately. But we do have this. This is from much later, of course. This is from after you were in San Diego. But I think that this is. Would you say this is sort of where your work in Atlanta kind of led you to?
It definitely did, because I started playing with multiple color, what we call block reduction prints. And that piece there, I was playing in a band at the time called Chocolate Kiss, and our final album was called No Funeral. So I made actually a series of 4 images, and that was one of the images. So yeah, it's very much kind of like Mexican kind of folk arty, very kind of simple in a lot of ways. I try to, you know, was trying to be expressive, at least in the gestures and in the expressions of these figures here. I was just really, I've always drawn skeletons, really since when I was growing up and stuff, and more so when I became involved with punk, because there's nothing more than punk than, you know, having skeletons.
Sure.
So that was very, I felt like I found something, or I came upon an idea and just kind of started exploring that more. Having started living in San Diego, to go down to Tijuana a lot, and eventually down to Ensenada. Like Tijuana was like, oh, this is okay and everything, but I wanted something a little bit more, not that Tijuana is not authentic, but I wanted something a little deeper than kind of like border culture.
Right.
So going down to Ensenada felt like almost like a second home in a lot of ways. I would pack up like my bodyboard and guitar and art supplies and just drive down for the weekend, lock myself in a hotel during the day and surf in the evenings or in the early mornings, walk around town, take pictures, kind of soak up the culture.
Mm-hmm. So by this point, of course, you're living in San Diego, as you just mentioned, and you wound up there, I think, in 2002, am I right?
Yeah, 2002.
And you moved there directly. So you had gotten from Birmingham to Boulder, then to Atlanta, then to San Diego.
Yeah.
And in San Diego, that's where you I can't remember. Were you teaching art in Atlanta?
I was teaching art. I actually taught elementary art for like 5 years there.
That's right, because you produced that zine of the kids' artwork called Mr. Bob.
Yeah,
that's right. I should have included that too. Right. So you became certified to teach in Atlanta.
I became certified teacher in Boulder actually, and it was really because I at University of Colorado, that's where I got my teaching certificate, and I actually taught at a middle school on a teacher that who had gone part-time because she was pursuing her master's. And so I would take her afternoon classes. And that kind of got my foot in the door. Then obviously I had to move to Atlanta and did some substitute teaching there, and eventually got a job on somebody who went on maternity leave that never came back, and ended up staying like 5 years at that school.
Wow. Okay. Then, as we just said, in the early 2000s, you relocated to San Diego, and you you started teaching. Is it the San Diego School District out in what town were you in? It
was actually Poway Unified.
Poway, right. And I think it's fair to say that you that your I don't know, your aesthetic and your politics, although not overt or necessarily directed at anybody, were present in the classroom. I think you were trying to create a situation there through the use of art and imagery that wound up kind of becoming a bone of contention, right, with parents and stuff. You want to talk about that a little bit? Because I think it's...
Well, my room actually had a lot of wall space, so I was putting up, everything on there from, like Denver Bronco paraphernalia to just absurd posters, band posters, just anything that I basically stumbled across, like, education posters from India, from Mexico, that sort of stuff. It was very kind of very worldly, those walls. And some images were large, some were small, but there was this one piece by the the Minutemen Project, where a group of kind of vigilantes that would go down to protect the border in San Diego. And the school and the school district were fairly conservative, I would say, and not that I had anything against it. We just we coexisted. I don't necessarily bring in politics. I don't talk politics with my students or anything like that. That's for sure. I don't think that's professional per se. I mean, you can have political discussions, but not, I'm not pushing my views or anything on
Sure,
people.
Yeah.
But a couple of the posters that I had were, one of them was taken down from a street pole that had to deal with the Minutemen, where they took the kind of, the original Minutemen idea from, the 1700s. And basically somebody slapped a clan hood on it and had like a circle across that, like they said, no pasaran, Minutemen, like don't pass. And I think somebody took offense to that because there's a YMCA program in there. And so there's a parent that wanted to meet with me. We, ironically, a U.S. Navy pilot, and he felt like, that poster shouldn't have been up. So I told him, said, okay, you can censor me. I'll take this down and all that. And he kind of got upset. He's like, I'm not trying to censor you and stuff like that. And I said, well, what are you asking, So I took it upon myself to took butcher paper, and there was like over 120 images, and I just butcher papered all of them up. I mean, I covered every single poster up and put an explanation like this poster is, being removed because, frogs don't really breathe fire, and, chairs are too political, just like kind of like really absurd, captions on it. So I think that's what got people's attention. So I showed up to school one morning, and I walk into my room, and there's like the superintendent, the associated superintendent, my principal, and somebody like taking photographs. Like, what the hell is going on, And lo and behold, apparently my name was being passed around on some right-wing radio station.
Wow.
I became the subject that morning.
That's scary.
People saying that I was a racist and, that I was this and that, and started getting all these emails. The guy, the Minutemen Project even left me a 5-minute message on my voicemail. But, you get people that start saying like, we know where you live.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
So it was kind of terrifying for a little bit. But the best piece of advice I was told is like, don't return any emails or calls, and in 2 or 3 days it'll go away. And sure enough, it did.
Yeah.
Just people forget about that. They're just so into. I think with anybody, they're just into like the sensationalism of of the media. Then when people don't feed into it, it goes away.
Right. During that whole time, you were becoming even more I hate to keep using the word prolific, but you were generating a huge body of work with your the Day of the Dead postcards and things like that, different products that you were making and selling around San Diego. And
I did, and it was weird because I started doing. God, I must have created at least 5,000-6,000 woodblock prints during that time, because I just kept on selling out of them at street fairs, eBay, just all the time, and just having show after show with that kind of imagery. And I really started getting involved in kind of like that San Diego, I guess you would call it, Chicano art community in a lot of ways. I was, kind of on the a little bit involved in that, and it felt very supportive, and it just was just involved in shows I felt like all the time. I really felt like I got a break from that. So, like I said, I never think about being that prolific, but when you kind of like pause from it and look back, and you just start to see the body of work, because I return back to San Diego every year and go through the garage, and it's kind of funny because like I'll take some of the work and stuff that hasn't sold, stuff that's not really that major, because I create a lot of little pieces. Like one of the shows I did, we'll come back to that in a second, but I'll take pieces and just drop them off at different parts of town, or I'll go on the walk and just leave them on sidewalks or on people's mailboxes.
Yeah. Postcards or what kind of work?
Maybe like little small woodblock prints that never sold.
Oh wow! Okay,
that's tried to sell. So just like leave random acts of art around town. During, I guess moving overseas, I don't feel like I had been that prolific until like I was in Egypt, and I started thinking like what's a show that I can create and kind of have for people in the States. And I've always kind of like been a person that wants to like share experiences with people, like inviting you and your mom out to Egypt, like you got to come and see this, or even in Ethiopia, like I want people to experience like something that's different, that's going to make them think in a different way.
Sure.
Much like places that I go through make me think in a different way, have different experiences. So one of the shows that got me a lot of attention was from NPR, nonetheless, was the show where I created, I think maybe like 600 pieces, like maybe 100 of them were like drawing and prints, and the rest were all photographs. But I had a show in San Diego, a place called Voz Alta, which is maybe a couple hundred square feet, this gallery space. Mm-hmm. And I recreated Alexandria, Egypt in there. It was called "Where Are You From?" because that's what taxi drivers often ask you when you get in the cab in Egypt. Like, "Where are you from?" You say, "I'm from the United States." And they're like, "No, where are you from?" They're like, what do you mean? No, your family. Where's your family from? Because in Egypt, that's important. Like where your roots from.
I see.
So I put all those images in there, including I went to go get a live goat to have a roam around the gallery. The gallery told me I couldn't have feral cats running around. Then we had
for the uninitiated, that's a constant presence in Egypt. Feral cats. Yeah.
Yeah, there's just cats are everywhere roaming around.
Yeah.
But I put, I let food kind of rot, because I like, as beautiful as Alexandria is, the kind of other side of that is there's a lot of trash kind of like thrown around because of the density of the population there. So you'll have to see piles of trash, like tomatoes and stuff. So I created that and had people smoking shisha in the gallery as well, to kind of get that smell going, and fried falafel there and stuff. So I was trying to hit all the senses, like what you would have being in Egypt, had video, and it was just a really fun show to kind of like put together. And it kind of made me kind of up my game in my art making, or at least the presentation of it, because normally you just create images and slap them on the wall, and that's that. You know, people come and look at it.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted something that people could interact with, and it's kind of fun to have a goat, you know.
And the subject matter of that show was largely the Day of the Dead stuff, or was it beginning to kind of touch on themes to do with your experience in the Arab world, in the Arab world? Pardon me. In Egypt.
Yeah, it was all photographs from like street photographs from Egypt. There was a little bit of some of my interpretation of like if Day of the Dead was in Egypt, what would Egyptians look like? Dressed up as Day of the Dead.
Yeah.
So, why not?
And then, so I guess soon after that, while you were, I think while you were in Egypt, or maybe it was after you relocated, you spent 2 years in the middle of the Egypt. In the middle of that time, you spent 2 years in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. And
yeah, it was weird because like right as we were coming out of Egypt, we were actually in the revolution in Egypt, which was kind of crazy to be at ground zero, and really kind of like scary.
Weren't you evacuated?
We were evacuated. Yeah, we got on a unmarked plane, and flew us a couple different places. Drop off people, we fuel up, come back. We were in the States for maybe 10 days, and they opened the school back up, and we flew back. And a lot of it was just weird because what had happened, I was actually in Doha, Qatar, seeing an old actually for professional development, and actually ran into our old friend Grant Guthrie there. And so yeah. But it was crazy because we were there, and that's when everything really kind of started falling apart. And so I got on a plane flying back to Alexandria, Egypt from Doha. And this is when everything really, like the government closed down all the phone lines, all the internet was cut off in the country. I didn't know what it was going to be like landing. So I'm on a plane with like 4 other people, like a huge airplane. It lands, they basically threw us off the plane, and the plane turns back and flies back away. And I'm like, oh my God, what the hell did I just get into?
Wow.
So the school picks me up, like the principal, and he has like a kind of like an armed security, and we're just driving down, and because it was totally like, it was anarchy because the government and the police had all quit. So it was like almost kind of like military rule. And so people were making like homemade weapons to protect their neighborhoods with like, like broomsticks with like kitchen knives at the end of it, or forks and swords, or just like the craziest stuff. So I'm driving down, and you'll see, tanks everywhere and stuff burning, and it was crazy. And, we had made Molotovs at the school, like put gasoline in old wine bottles and stuff, and siphon gasoline out of the vehicles on campus and stuff, thinking that people were going to jump the wall and, attack us.
Right.
Because we were in a very kind of like,
well, we should point out too, the school is kind of a fortress, right? In the sea of humanity that the city is, this teeming, dusty, crazy, chaotic place. The shoot school was like an island of relative peace and quiet, surrounded by a big wall, right?
Yeah. So we're in a walled compound, and keep in mind there's no like barbed wire or broken glass on the top of the wall, so it could be, it could have been easily breached. But instead, I mean, like I said, the neighborhood was very working class, very conservative, a little bit verging on the Muslim Brotherhood sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And their whole response to it was they got on the microphone on the mosque saying, come and protect the school, protect our neighbors, that sort of stuff. So it was just a whole community thing. It was actually very beautiful in a lot of ways of how people got together and bonded.
To protect the school.
And that sort of stuff. We didn't feel threatened at all. We felt very protected, actually.
Interesting. Wow.
So it's weird how you have that CNN effect where, people or, foreigners are getting killed or something like that. And it was complete opposite. It wasn't that like that at all. They just didn't want people coming into their neighborhood and stealing. And when they caught people, vandalizing their neighborhood, they were dealt with pretty swiftly, I think. But yeah, we actually did 2 revolutions in Egypt, version 1 and version 2. And at the end of version 2 is when we went to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. So we were in Egypt for 4 years and Addis for a couple of years. And I'm so glad you actually came out to visit us, and we got to see all kinds of really amazing sights.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's an unforgettable experience going there. It's like nowhere else in the world that I've ever been. I'm so grateful that you guys were there, that I had the opportunity to come and sort of get the local treatment, not feel quite as much of a tourist as certainly could have without you being there. So it was really amazing. While you were there, is when you began. I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's when you began creating the body of work that eventually became your book, Den Void and the Cowtown Punks, that you published about 4 years ago. Am I right?
It is, yeah. It's kind of weird because the reason for even like making those drawings is because I was looking, at your artwork. Yeah, there you go. This is the first image I created. It was Matt Bischoff of the Fluid. So when the Fluid got back together, I was kind of, big, huge Fluid fan. I was up in front row and just taking pictures of the band. And so I'm like, internet's pretty scattered in Ethiopia. It's kind of like hit or miss. And the few times that you can get on to it, I'm looking at your artwork. I'm looking at all the drawings Chris Sherry is making for his, shirts, another close friend of ours, and also Rich Jacobs, also a good friend of ours. All our friends seem to be prolific artists in some ways. And
it's funny how that happened. Yeah.
Yeah. And here I am with an art degree, not making art, just kind of felt crummy. I'm like, I'm in another job teaching school, and I'm not really, doing what I'd like to be doing. And so I started going on hikes behind our apartment in Ethiopia, which is like stepping back 100 years, basically.
At least.
At least, yeah, a couple of centuries maybe.
Yeah.
And I started making some sketches about the area. Then I was going through some old photos, like the Fluid photos, and it was like, damn, I'm gonna copy one of those photographs I took and add some brush and ink color to it. And that kind of started the whole thing. I started just making more and more. Then I did the Frantics painting because they were, I think, my all-time kind of like favorite band that turned into the Fluid. Eventually, our members went to start the Fluid and other bands from that time. I felt like I found a way to do a book because I had started working on Den Void and the Cowtown Punks. It's been a project that's been in the works for like 20 years. I would do some writing here and there and stuff. And just always looking back on it, I said, like, man, this is just, it's not going to be a book. It sucks. There's not really enough good photos from that time. I mean, Dwayne Davis from Wax Track took amazing photos. Joe Dallenbach took great photos. Nancy Kennedy from Denver took great photos. But it wasn't, I don't think, enough to create like a good, anthology of the Denver punk scene. So I felt like, that the pictures should represent the music. So I started using a lot of bright colors and a lot of line outlining, working with oil paints again, working with brush and ink, and really just kind of bringing out the vibrance of how I interpreted the music and the scene back then. And I felt like that would be an appropriate way. And it became a muse in a lot of ways that propelled me to really start interviewing people again and just get the project rolling. And it's like one of those scenarios where, yeah, I've been thinking about for 20 years, but really the book was done in about 18 months. Uh, I must have created about 150 drawings during that time. And it also helped that Anna, my wife, was pregnant with her daughter, and she went on maternity leave and went back to San Diego. So I was stuck in Addis Ababa for about 5 months by myself, and so that you know what that leads to. It's um, just staying up all night and basically just having this really kind of crazed mindset
Mhm.
of being a hermit and just making a lot of artwork, calling up people, interviewing, transcribing, and so it was really kind of just hyper focused on the project. And then of course I reached out to you because you're a master at creating a certain look for something, and I think we spent such enough time with each other that I fully trusted you on laying out that book, and it was just an amazing job you did.
Well, that's kind of you. Thank you. I mean, it was a labor of love, to say the least. I find it so interesting that it took you. I mean, okay, Anna was away for a few months, and you had a lot of time on your hands. But I find it so poignant and so beautiful in a way that you're in the Horn of Africa, of all places on the globe. You're in Addis Ababa. It couldn't be a more diametrically opposite reality than Denver and the punk scene in 1982 or 19 whatever. And yet, that's where your mind was. And there's something to me so touching about that. And I know I've tried to force you in the context of promoting that book and stuff. I've tried to get you to kind of I don't know, express yourself more. And maybe I'm putting words in your mouth and making a bigger deal out of this than it is for you. But for me, the idea of you sitting in your apartment in Ethiopia, sort of meditating on these snapshot moments of your life 25 years before, and clearly the community that comes with that. I mean, punk is so much more to us, and I think to most people involved in it, than just music and a record collection. Our identities are certainly wrapped up in it. Our whole community, everyone we know, is involved in one way or another. And I just maybe it doesn't even require any comment from you, but to me it's so wonderful that that's what you did while you were there. You weren't out sketching still lives of street scenes in Addis. You were wholly focused on this thing that's almost like an abstraction, And I just I don't know.
It had been bothering me for a long time that I remember 1986. I'm putting out flyers down in Denver, just trying to call people to who wants to be interviewed, commissioned, that sort of stuff, and I didn't get anything. And I have some like pre-writing about it and stuff. So it always bothered me that it was there, and that it was kind of like an uncompleted project in my mind.
Mm.
And so I felt like I guess I didn't feel whole unless that project happened in a lot of ways, because it's something I've been holding on to. And I think you're right, because I think a lot of my identity is wrapped up in that music scene, the community that I grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
For better or worse, I mean, it was sometimes a very violent community, but ultimately it was it was like a family, a big family.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was always touching to me in a way that, I guess, being a part of something that I don't know what else to compare it to in a lot of ways, other than being you are in this kind of crazy extended family, people that have shared experiences of kind of living on the, I wouldn't say the fringe necessarily. I mean, most of us were suburban kids,
Mm-hmm.
but people that kind of march to a different beat. And so, I mean, we met because of punk rock. I met most of my friends, older friends, because of the music scene, playing in bands and that sort of stuff. So it was kind of like a little bit of an exclusive world that we kind of created ourselves. I guess that's the important part, is that we got to create it all. We all had a say in it. And there was no right or wrong answers. It was what it was, and it wasn't something that was planned. It just kind of went on its own trajectory. Whatever the person brought into it is what it kind of like became, and that's kind of like the beautiful thing about it. And I guess that's why it's near and dear to me, is because of the creativity and the freedom that punk rock is.
There's something very sort of full circle about the fact that your entryway into punk, I think, if you want to call it that, was seeing Black Flag play in Denver in 1982.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. And then fast forward to, was it 2013? You were able to talk your way into the Flag, onto the Flag tour bus for a week in Europe. There's something spectacular about that, and in a sense, like I feel like only you could have pulled that off. And I wonder what your thoughts are on that now.
I think with anything, it even goes back to the show in at that ground, the Fallout shelter, where we kind of broke into the place. Like it had to happen. So if there's a will, there's a way. I mean, so you just in punk rock.
You're talking about, for anyone who doesn't know, you're talking about a show in Denver with the band Lungfish that took place.
Yeah, when Lungfish came and Savalas opened up our band. And the show had to happen, so we had to, open the place ourselves and let ourselves in and kind of like set that up.
Because there had been a miscommunication with the owner of the venue or something, and we were not. There was nobody there.
There was nobody there, and the place was unlocked. We didn't steal anything. We just used electricity, and the band played. The bands got paid.
And there's photos on Facebook to prove it happened.
Yeah, there is. But it's kind of like the same idea of like, seeing Black Flag. I think it was actually the spring of '83 at the Rainbow Music Hall. Then getting involved in promoting shows. So I knew like Bill Stevenson, who ended up drumming for Black Flag. And through Chris Sherry, because he does all the artwork for the Descendants. So I was telling Chris, it's like, oh man, I want, Flag's playing in Belgium. I really want to go see, the show and stuff. And I said, I lost Bill's email address. We sent it to me. So I sent Bill a message like, hey Bill, I'm thinking of flying out. See you guys. Will you put me on the guest list? And he writes back one line, totally.
It's amazing. So you flew from Addis to
I did.
To
Brussels.
Okay.
Yeah, direct flight from Addis to Brussels. I called in work and said like I'm sick, I'm not, coming in. So I took a long weekend and flew to Brussels. And actually, the first show was in Munich. So I spent the night at some Airbnb in Brussels. And hopped on the train, like 8-hour train ride, and went to Munich. Met up with the guys, Keith Morris, Chuck Dukowski, Stephen Egerton.
I mean, that must have been like, these are guys you've known for decades, who are infamous characters, and they have invited you to come and hang out with them in Munich. I mean, that's this is the kind of thing that only could happen to you.
Yeah, well, they didn't invite me. I invited myself. Bill was kind enough to put me on the guest list, and then that time came, that kind of like awkward time that says, I don't have a place to stay.
He's like, well, I'm not staying with you.
Do you have a couch on the tour bus? I'll carry equipment for you. I'll be your beer guy. What do you want? So I did. I was like the person in charge of, like, and obviously on the rider, bands get like drinks and all that sort of stuff. So I was sent to get the crate of beer and bring it back on the tour bus. And
You're the guy who
by the end of the 3-day tour, I was carrying, amp heads and basses and guitars and stuff. So, so I earned my keep.
Incredible. Were you invited back for future excursions? No.
I don't think so. I think the last night was, that was kind of a wild night. No, I went from there from Munich to Berlin, then to Belgium to do this big festival called Groesrock, which was like one of the craziest shows I've ever seen. Like, European crowds are just insane. When you see people in wheelchairs like floating on top of a crowd, with a black flag set, that's
crowd surfing in a wheelchair. That's amazing. Wow.
Yeah. So you had it was amazing. So, after the shows, we got the band beers, and they were out doing, meeting with their friends, basically, like other bands that had played and stuff. And so it was great to sit in on some of those conversations, people trading war stories and all that sort of stuff. And woke up next morning on the tour bus. Everyone was at the airport, and got my bag and left. It was just such a whirlwind, like 3 days, and the next day I was back teaching in Addis Ababa. It just was.
That is so surreal. That must have been such a trip for you.
Then we did it a year later. This time I brought Anna along. We wrote Bill again. He's like, Bill, we get my wife and I in on the Descendants all shows, and he's like,
oh, wow.
Totally. So we.
I forgot about that. Where was that?
Yeah, that was in Groesrock too. That was in Belgium.
Okay.
But I think they did a lot of shows during then. I think, or maybe not. I think Milo just flew in for one show. But it was cool just to see those guys. Because I mean, we used to put on all, starting back in, I think, '87 in Denver. That's how Chris Cherry, I think, met them too, and started doing a lot of work for them. So it's definitely kind of like the Descendants all family for sure. It's cool to know those guys.
It must be. It's got to be really rewarding to know them, to see that they're still active after all this time, to go and be part of what they're doing now. To have that kind of continuum in your life with anything over decades.
Yeah, again, that comes from like punk rock. Like, why do I still know all these people and stuff?
Yeah.
It's just like a bond, something that we're all collectively a part of, even though we're in different parts of the country or different parts of the world. You still have that bond, and you just pick up the friendship where it left off. Last time you see those guys. And that's the way it is with anybody, reconnecting. When we started doing the second part to Dem Boy, the Colorado Crew book, it was great talking to just everybody. Eric from Christie Front Drive. I'm drawing a blank. It was in the book.
Half the residents of Colorado from the mid '90s.
Yeah, it's 60 people. And not only that, but somebody like Julie Peasley, getting a chance to kind of talk with her. It was great that we both got to interview her, because we both know her from a totally different perspective.
So I'm just got the book cover up since we're talking about it, and for the sake of completion here, let's show the other one as well. This is your first book, Den Void and Cowtown Punks, also available from your website. And these are collections of your drawings of the photos we've been talking about, and an exhaustive amount of interviews and writing about what was going on back then and our experiences and your experience, well, Denvoid, the first book concentrates on your childhood and then the things that kind of made you who you were back then. And then much more recently than those two books, you've recently published this book. And I wonder if you'd like to talk about this a little bit.
That book, I had an art patron named Maddie Gomez. She goes by Pepper. But it was interesting because she and I kind of like became friends through eBay when I was selling my other Day of the Dead prints. So she was buying everything that I made, everything that I put out. So she was always one of the first customers when I had a new release, and she would buy the prints and I would ship them off to her. And it became to the point where I would just ship them off to her after I was done making it, and she would send me the money later. And she actually asked earlier last year if I'd be interested in doing a book. And I'm in Abu Dhabi. I don't have access to my prints and stuff. And I was just like, I think she kind of felt like I blew her off a little bit. And I didn't mean to sound that way. I can be very kind of elusive in that sort of way. Somebody asked me to do something, I'll get around to it, but it's just not at that moment. And so when I was back in San Diego this summer, and with COVID, you can't really do a lot. So it gave me a lot of time in the garage, and I just found a lot of the old pieces of artwork, and I scanned everything, and I basically threw a manuscript together within a couple of weeks. And after basically telling her no, then send somebody a manuscript was kind of absurd in some ways, but she appreciated. I think she was like kind of blown away, like whoa.
Yeah.
So that's how things work. It's almost like the Denvoid book. Like it just incubates in you, then you just come out and you do it.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a wonderful synopsis of your whole body of work over the last 20 or so years, not just specifically your punk oriented stuff. From that's more featured in the Denvoid and Colorado Crew books.
That was a specific time period from 2002 to about 2009 before I left. So that's kind of more the Day of the Dead stuff that I was doing. And that doesn't even include like 3 other major shows I did during that time.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Painting on CDs, because I did like paintings on CD art.
I don't remember that at all. How funny.
Yeah. Why would you? I mean, it was just kind of like, it was kind of a flash. And that was something else that I was kind of known for, those little CDs in San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
It's just something there wasn't really that social media to hype those up at the time. But yeah, I had a couple of shows with those and
Wow.
a couple other things. So.
And since you've landed in Abu Dhabi, I would say that you certainly haven't eased up on the amount of work you're producing, and I think work like this is indicative of the kind of stuff you're doing now. I think is that fair to say?
It is. Actually, I started thinking like I wanted to do something on living out here. I haven't really connected to it. I'll probably do it like in 10 years when I'm away from here.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm actually started working on a whole Ethiopian series right now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I'm trying to put together an idea, a proposal for a show. I don't know where, but it's it's kind of strange. And I thought about you when I was making one piece. Maybe I'll share it with you. Here we are, live art. You'll remember this piece because we were very like fascinated by the Ark of the Covenant being in Ethiopia,
Allegedly.
Right? And so one of the first pieces I did for it, here I am making a fool out of myself, and I did where the three ladies are kind of like in the back, like praying to the wall, where the supposedly the ark's on the other side of that. So
that's incredible. That's a beautiful piece of work, Bob. I loved the photo, and I love the drawing even more.
Thank you.
I'll never forget that day. That's a drawing of a photo taken in Axum, in Ethiopia, which is apparently the longest continually inhabited place in Africa.
It is. They have all those obelisks there, which is crazy.
Yes, and that's the seat of the Ethiopian Coptic Church. It's the headquarters of the church is there, and that's those women in your drawing are not allowed on the grounds of the church. It's men only, which is interesting. And those women are, I'm not sure what the word is, prostrating themselves or something. I don't know how you describe it, but they are gesturing towards the building that supposedly holds the Ark of the Covenant, which is the basis of the whole Coptic religion, if I'm not mistaken, right? Just its presence in Ethiopia is why the church exists. Is that right?
Yeah, it's true. Absolutely.
Okay.
And I'll show you one last piece here. I started it yesterday. It's not done, but it's near.
Wow.
So it's like a bunch of village kids that were near Axum, actually. And this was another trip I actually took with my students up there. Towards a place called Adwa, which there is a famous battle of Adwa where they battled the Italians and turned them back around these mountains. But yeah, I don't know. I've created maybe like 5 or 6 drawings so far on it. So I think if I get to a dozen, then I can seriously approach a gallery or something that says like I'd like to do a show.
Are you nostalgic about Ethiopia now? Because I remember when you left, there was certainly a kind of sense of relief, I think, or maybe just exhaustion with the whole kind of the circumstances of your existence there. I guess I'm not sure.
Yeah, it was hard living there because the electricity went out or the water would go out for days, or there wouldn't be any gasoline so you couldn't drive, or it was a hardship post for sure. But those often tend to be the most rewarding, especially in retrospect and in the type of friendship you create there. And that doesn't mean that you don't have that here, like in Abu Dhabi. Abu Dhabi is like a Western city for really is what it comes down to. It's so cosmopolitan and so busy, and whereas places like Egypt and Ethiopia, you're really immersed in the culture there. I'm not sure what the culture is here in Abu Dhabi. I've been struggling with that, other than like French culture and Mole culture. It doesn't, to me, it doesn't feel like it extends beyond that. That doesn't mean we haven't made some good friends here, but there isn't. I mean, we don't have any Emirati friends, whereas in Ethiopia we had Ethiopian friends, or in Egypt we have tons of Egyptian friends, and so we felt very included in those places. And here I still feel like a stranger. It feels very empty a lot of times.
Interesting. Is it a car culture? It doesn't seem like there's much pedestrian kind of activity.
It is a car culture, but it's also, Abu Dhabi is a very kind of interesting place because it has all the ingredients, what makes like a very livable place. It's very safe. You leave your car unlocked, you can leave it running in a parking lot, leave your bike out, no one's gonna take it. There's cameras everywhere, but
It's like the Singapore of the Middle East.
Yeah, exactly. But it's also very, like I said, it's just easy place. It's very family friendly. There's, you can ride your bike, you can go to the beach, go to Legoland, go to, Warner Brothers. Just it's Southern California suburbs in a lot of ways.
It looks like downtown Irvine. It's
yeah, sure.
Glass and palm trees and sunshine.
Yeah, except for everything's kind of high end. Like we live above like a Lamborghini dealership, and there's like the Rolls Royce dealership and the Bentley dealership. So you have like, I'm surprised during our interview here we haven't heard anybody racing around.
Has living there changed your attitude about America at all?
No, I think, not being in America, I just get everything from the media and from what, people are posting on Facebook. America is not, like in other places where American can be the center of stuff because of where we are, and it's being so international. America is it's not the center of the world.
Right.
So you don't always have that kind of like in your face so much. It just, I don't know. I mean, we sometimes think about going back home and stuff, and yeah, because I love San Diego. I love the community there still. We have, a lot of our friends are back in the States, and it's nice to see them, and we miss them. We miss family. So it's hard in that way. But also in another way, just being in the United States, sometimes I just want to leave after being there a couple of days sometimes, because I just can't deal with like going to Target or something. It just feels very foreign in now. Like I would never step into a Walmart. It would feel like very stressful in a lot of ways.
Oh, okay.
And just people's attitude of, people having attitude. Like here, people definitely don't have, they have attitude by revving up their engines, but it's not like, hey bro, let's, that sort of thing. There's not a lot of that kind of posturing in that sort of way.
People are more humble, would you say?
Yeah, like violence isn't the forefront of everything. Whereas I feel like when I'm in the States, it always feels like on the verge of feels volatile in a lot of ways. Like there's people that are gonna get angry really quick. And I'm just not talking like politics. I live on the, in some intense neighborhoods in San Diego and stuff. And, when you have people robbing like the tamale lady for money and stuff, like that would never happen here. If somebody did something like that, that person would be dead, Wow. They wouldn't tolerate that, especially like places like in Egypt. It just would be unheard of. And I guess that the rest of the world perceives America as very a violent place. People with kind of short tempers. I can see a little bit of that too, but I also think Americans are very, very giving and caring at the same time. Sure. I just think there's just bad people everywhere, but I don't like that attitude of competition when I go back to the States. I guess it just feels foreign to me, and it makes me feel very kind of on edge.
Okay.
I don't like that.
I was one thing that I came away with from visiting you in Alexandria when I did was that we hear a lot over here about how the Arab world hates the West, about how they hate the United States, and honestly, I couldn't have felt anything more opposite while I was there. Like every kid is wearing a Hollister sweatshirt. The jeans are all painted on. It doesn't feel like a conservative place. Everyone's smiling, they're happy, and they are. I got the sense that people were there was a genuine curiosity that the Westerners were there visiting, walking around, just being in the mix. I felt like they kind of appreciated it, or it was at the very least it was a novelty for them that they were amused by. I never got a sense of any kind of hostility. In fact, the only place that I haven't felt hostility from the so-called Arab world is in big cities in Europe, where those populations are the marginalized ones, and they're the reality of it is much more stark. You know what I mean? It's not. It doesn't feel as naturally integrated as it does in places like Cairo and Alexandria. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does.
There are huge presences of Muslim communities in Europe, but no one feels particularly happy to be there. And in Egypt, everyone's smiling.
Yeah, they are. And I think in a lot of places, even in Lebanon, people are smiling. Maybe not as much as in Egypt, but I mean, we had an opportunity to travel different parts of the Arab world, and we always felt relatively safe in all of them. Always felt welcome, from Morocco to Egypt to even the UAE, Jordan, all those places. They've all been great experiences.
Bob, I want to point out that some of our friends are here with us this evening and commenting. Okay. Our old friend Dan Berger from Denver has made a nice comment about your appearance. My good friend Clayton Blackstock from Little Rock is here. Dan Steinberg telling us we look great. Thank you, Dan, for that. Demetrius Antunia, I always say his name wrong. Demetrius, I'm sorry. Demetrius Antunia. Mr. Rob Medina, Mr. Bob Rob Medina, if you know what that means.
Is that like Bob Medina?
That's right. Our old buddy Eli from, once upon a time, now from the greater San Diego area. Bob was the first band dude I ever saw that had tattoos. Me too. Rich and I were just commenting today about your facial hair being my first. Your goatee was my first.
Somebody, it was funny. I think Jody, her brother played in Dead Silence.
So did she.
Yeah, she did. That's right. I forgot. Yeah, she posted a picture, or somebody did, of Ted and I together, and I'm like buying a Dead Silence 7-inch and stuff.
Oh, wow.
And I did. I had that I looked like some creeper old dude, and was like 18 or something.
Preston and Stacy are with us as well. Some other Denver friends of ours. Thanks everybody for being here. It's really awesome.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So Bob, what's next for you?
I don't know. I've been looking at a lot of real estate porn. I call it porn because I'll stay up late at night and looking at this website called Idealista. It's in Spain. So again, we're kind of looking at ideas of buying a piece of property in Spain.
Wow.
It's hard because the euro has really shot up against the US dollar. That's any indication of America struggling right now.
Wow. Yeah.
When there's a discrepancy between the euro and the dollar. So we're hoping that when prices come down and the whole COVID thing kind of like subsides, then we'll seriously look into getting a property, maybe in some place like Valencia or otherwise.
And is it true that it's like the situations in Italy where there's whole towns that are abandoned and you can buy a chateau for €1 if you pay the taxes on it or something?
I think so. Not that crazy in Spain, but there are definitely, for under $100,000 you can live next to the sea in certain parts of Spain. For sure. For like a full house, not like a little dinky, 400 square foot apartment. We're talking like, 1,500, 2,000 square foot house with fruit trees growing on it and stuff like that. But then again, it's a commitment. How often are you going to go visit that house? That sort of thing. Whereas I think if you're more in the city, like Valencia is still manageable price-wise, but like places like Barcelona and Madrid are way out of our price range. So.
Yeah, that's not surprising. I mean, but Spain is so big, and there's so many. I mean, I've barely scratched the surface of it myself. It seems there's so many amazing towns all over the place.
It was cool because Anna and I, with our daughter, got to do the Camino de Santiago a couple of years ago, which we walked, I think, like 900. We walked 900 kilometers, like in 33 days.
That is incredible.
Yeah, so I pushed her in a stroller, and sometimes you go up mountains and hills and stuff, and it could be kind of gnarly with a child. But we did it, and we got our Compostelas when we reached Santiago.
Wow!
And so that even made me fall more in love with Spain. Just going through like the small villages and stuff. And, meeting people along the way is nice.
Yeah, it's an enchanting place, to say the least. Well, I hope for my sake that you do wind up moving there so I can come visit you there.
Maybe you can, house sit.
While you're vacationing in Ethiopia for all time's sake.
Exactly.
Well, Bob, I know you have a full day ahead of you there. You're probably going to go back to bed for a couple of hours, but I really want to thank you for taking the time to talk with me here. And
it's been great. I appreciate it. This has been fun.
I love talking with you. Any chance to catch up is great, but I appreciate you letting me poke around in your past and pry a little bit, and hope that we've helped illuminate some of what motivates you and some of what's behind an incredibly curious and dynamic and very vast body of work that you've been contributing to for the 3 decades now that I've known you. I think it's remarkable, and I'm really in awe of your work and your accomplishments. I love the books we've done together, and really look forward to seeing what's next.
Well, cheers to many more years of us being together and doing stuff, and it's been fab so far. So.
It has. And again, Bob's books are available on Amazon or from Pepper's website or your website, and all of it's easily Googleable. And highly encourage everybody to pick up those books. They are well worth the price of admission. Bob, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for being part of Movers and Makers. I will imagine talk to you soon, and see everybody else in a few weeks.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Bye.